What's up, man?
Hey,
How you doing?
Michael. Is it Michael?
Close, close. Let's start with you introducing yourself.
My name is Danny White. I go by Ethan Windy on the interwebs.
And why did you choose the artist name you did?
Well, it's starts as like something I've used since I was a little kid. Backyard baseball, it's like a PC game. Shout out Pablo Sanchez. It is like my coach's name was Ethan Windy because I wanted to have a name that wasn't mine, and my name Danny White. It's an anagram for that. So it's just the letters are all scrambled up, and I was like, well, that's going to be a fun Instagram handle, right? Like something I've always used, and now it's after sort of gained a following, and it becomes part of like who I am or whatever. It's like it's ultimately a little bit confusing, but I think it's also a good conversation starter. I often will say if people are like, is it Danny or is it Ethan? I'm usually like, well, if you know me, it's call me Danny. If you're more familiar with my work, you call me Ethan. Both are fine. Um, what we're experiencing here is not necessarily an existential crisis as much as it is a fun login name that I used when I was a kid. All
Yeah.
right,
Well,
my
I was gonna
bad.
say you can almost kind of tell if somebody knows you from the start, whether they call you Danny or
it's
Ethan.
it's like I said, it's not a big deal. I think people generally are like try to be respectful with like, sorry if I don't know your name or I've been calling you the wrong thing, but really it's like I don't really care. But my name is Danny.
Yeah. Okay. Great. What is the first thing you made in glass?
Glass lobsters.
Lobsters, huh?
Yeah, like well, when I first started to figure it out or make something that I felt like I was like, oh, that's something that has my voice a bit more. Like we've all tried. I started in soft glass, so it was like this big hot raging furnace where I'm like gathering glass, and I'm like, this is just like ridiculous. Like, why would anybody want to do this? And trying to make little solid forms, shapes. So like I did like put some things in an annealer initially, but as far as sculpture that was completed and I felt good about, I did this little lobster series. I'm not really sure why. I think I maybe just had access to the color orange or something, and
Hmm.
I was like, and um, I did a lot of bit working at that point, which is where people will bring glass to add to a piece of glass, and so there's a lot of different kinds of bits that's involved in a lobster, and for whatever reason, like I said, I created this whole storyline. I made like lobster dinner where I had like a boiling pot with two lobsters hanging over it. It's like my glass one final project, and on top was like a dinner plate with like lobster tails and stuff. It was just kind of not allowing what I didn't know about sculpting or glass sculpture to not get in the way of like executing an idea.
Yeah.
So when I say lobster, it's not necessarily just like out of the kiln. Like I'm proud. It's more like an idea of this lobster dinner scenario that I just really took that I thought to the next level, and like I said, like had a well-rounded idea in the end. So and after that, I started to get interested in or a little bit more familiar with colors, with adding glass color to clear glass, because that's something that I really understand because I have a painting background. At the time when I started to take glass in school, I was pursuing a degree in painting, and so like I was aware of color theory, just what different colors can achieve and what colors look good next to each other. You can't exactly mix colors like you can with paints, but I was familiar with why colors look good next to each other. So my next the next thing after the lobster, like when I really like to like answer your question again, is really like when I started to make clowns
Okay.
because um, color was everything to me at the time with the like I said with the painting stuff. So what's more colorful than a clown? Like what's more random? What can you like? It's such like an open canvas for randomness and character, and like that's all stuff that I understood. I just didn't really know how to sculpt glass very well. So by putting these blobs of color that made sense together, you could tell that this was what it was intended to be. And some of my friends were like could could see that I was taking interest in it and suggested that I look up um, this like the Italians, like Italian maestros, like Pino Signoretto. It's like the best to ever do it, an Italian maestro sculptor. And I looked at some of the work that he made, and uh, the clowns are a pretty common thing. Pagliacci are a pretty common theme in Venetian glass, especially in Murano. And I was just like, it's like, we're always looking for somebody to look up to. So it's like I try to look at the best to ever do it, and then like try to fall in line and see what I can come up with too.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Validating.
Very much so. So you kind of touched on it, but how did you get started in glass?
Just sort of stumbled upon it. My school, Bowling Green State University in Ohio, middle of nowhere. Um, they offered a glass program there, and I was doing painting at the time. And for my degree, I needed a 3D credit, and I was actually studying in Italy when I registered for the class, and was like, I'm just gonna take glass, just because I have to, but also ceramics is, it wasn't really, it's really cold and, dusty. Little did I know how dusty the glass studio would be, but, and I took a class and kept taking them and just never really stopped once I started. I wasn't initially in love with the material per se, because I think any glassblower will tell you that there's a relationship that like develops. It's almost an odd courtship to a degree, where you develop a relationship with the material and let it work for you, and you're able to kind of manipulate it in a way that makes sense. And once that goes down, there's really no holds bar after that. So, like I
Yeah,
said, once I started, I never stopped.
that's great. You named one, but were there other big influences when you started? And that can be any kind of creative influence, not just glass
For
necessarily.
sure, I've always been interested in when I mentioned the Pinot stuff. It's like that's a glass sculptor whose work I could appreciate, because at that time I'm very like process oriented person as far as how I view a work as being successful. Like I definitely am familiar with the ideas of well executed composition and like themes and all sorts of tones that involved in a successful piece. So I wasn't limited to just the process part, but I definitely would look to the best. Like Martin Janicki is another one. Just Czech maestro, another best to ever do it. He was a visiting artist in my school when he was just kind of starting out in the States then. And he came through our school, and at the time he was like, I'm just a traveling artist. Like we'll go to different places and work, create for the students, and then he would go to the next place. And I always thought that was like kind of a cool way to live and be an artist, is just to you can experience new things, like keep honing in on your skills, and educate people a little bit. I mean, he would educate more by showing than like telling, which was something to abide by a little bit for me too, because it's like, you know, it's very engaging as is. I definitely look to two-dimensional artists as well. Like I have, I always appreciated Banksy, just as from like an artist perspective, like an edgy artist perspective, where you play into the human psyche a little bit with the work that you create, where it's, there's all these little like bait and switch, or like kind of catch 22s that go along with things, where it's like there's a little bit of deception, a little bit of reception, and ultimately like just a way to keep the viewer involved in art for the passerby. I've always enjoyed that, where something that you create is like, you're kind of leaving it out there for people to experience. And I think that relationship between the work and the audience is important, because it's um, reaction to me is it means a lot, because A lot of the stuff that I create is speaking on a moment. It's representing a moment in time, like what via expression or positioning or just overall narrative. And I think that Banksy is really good at that. I also really enjoyed Norman Rockwell, which is this early American painter who wasn't, he's not in the Smithsonian or anything, but he would paint a painting every, and that's just this huge book over here about it, but he would paint one painting a month for the Saturday Evening Post or something like that. I forget, but it just spoke on American life, and within each painting and composition, there was a lot of little details, little details that were there for people that I believe for those that recognize, like you can appreciate the work by itself and what the scene represents, but if you look around in like the little corners of the painting, you'll see things that help tell the story as well. And I believe that those are there for the people that can appreciate them. And that's like another artist that I like, who isn't even a painter or a fine artist at all, is the dude that makes the Waldo books, the Martin Hansford. If you take any little 1 inch by 1 inch situation that's going on any of those pages, there's a whole little story in each little quadrat that goes on there, and I love that. Like I love like the little Easter eggs that are within something. Like some people just look for Waldo, but like he's right there. But there's a lot of other shit that's going on that I just feel like if you have that ability to put it into the details and tell your story through subcontext, then that I find that really inspiring. And there's certainly a lot of other peers that inspired by as well, like people that have also a very human approach to what they do. I I tend to or at least be more receptive to other artists that are also kind of in it for the love of the game. People that like to make glass because glass is tight, and it's it can be kind of a secret club to that degree, where it's like, I sometimes imagine if it's like you're like a plastic surgeon or something, you're like walking down the street and like nobody has any idea that you just like reconstructed someone's face or something, and it's like you just keep that to yourself most of the time. And like if you're a glass artist walking down the street, like nobody has any idea that you just like dropped like a 10 mil perk into a cheeseburger or something. And it's like, but the ones that know, they know,
They
and
know,
so
yeah.
you just carry on.
It's great. Love that answer. Where did you first sell your glass?
And uh I think selling glass, first of all, one of my favorite things about glass or being able to make glass is or having access to glass is to make gifts for people. I've always I've always found that the things that I make with somebody else in mind, like, you know, they would really like this or this. Like I'm thinking about that person the whole time I'm making something for them. The piece ends up having like its own separate energy and life source that I think is almost better than the stuff that I create for no reason or for even just for myself. So so getting that out of the way, the first time I've sold glass, like, like, are you validating me? It was at probably at some tabletop glass Black Swamp Arts Festival, Bowling Green, Ohio,
Okay.
2008, maybe.
Wow.
Uh,
Black Swamp. Huh? I like that.
yeah, well, like there used to be a swamp, and
Okay.
and that was the first time I had sold. Like I used to make these things called garbage pendants, and this was all soft glass. It was I would just find little cutoffs and little. There's a lot of glass trash with any glass process. Like there's oftentimes people, especially that are outside of glass, will see your throwaway bin. They'll look in there and be like, "Look at all this sick like colors and all this stuff." And, like I would go through those little bins and pick out little things, little cane pull-offs, chunks off the ground, and I would encase them in clear glass and create little like teardrop kind of amorphic pendants, and I called them garbage pendants, and I would sell them to my friends or give them away to my friends or sell them to people some street fair or whatever, gives my grandma. I think she still rocks them, and I thought that was kind of cool because it was a low access point price wise, but also it was just fun for me to make them, and I can make them relatively quick. A lot of the other stuff I make is tends to be a little more time involved, and it's very rare that you open a kiln and there's like more than one thing in there. So it was a cool little line of stuff that I could make a lot of and make them fast, and it felt good.
And I feel like it's an important conversation too that hasn't really been talked about. Is like I lived out of people's scrap buckets for like the first 2 years of
Oh
my
yeah,
law and
but you,
glass.
but you gonna finish that?
Yeah, welding little tubes together, taking the little scraps,
Yeah,
and so I think being able to utilize that at the start is really important and something that
definitely,
needs to be discussed.
definitely. I mean, I'm also like pretty thrifty person as it is, so it's like if I'm like, you know, I'll use color down to like the last little thing. Like it's not even a money thing. I can just come up with like I see a small piece of red and I think like lipstick for something, or like oh that could be a tiny tomato. It's just the elk theory. Like none of this animal goes to waste.
Mm,
You know.
hell yeah, man. Are there certain objects that you made at the start that you still make?
Um, I've always been interested in human beings. I've always been interested in making characters, portraits, anything that feels relatable to me. And I think I've always, and to some degree, been interested in giving objects personification, like adding eyes to something, or like the artist that I was telling you about, Martin. He said that Danny can give life to a potato, and I was like, that was kind of an interesting thing to say. But what he meant by that was that it'll just be just this lump of glass, like especially when I was starting off, and then all of a sudden you're like, what is he making? And then two or three moves later, it's like, oh, it's Walter. It's just like become like I have a way of adding. I don't know if it's style, influence, whatever, process wise, like just adding a little bit of personality to glass, and I've always done that. So like from start to finish, I've always wanted to create a narrative with the stuff that I make. So objects specifically, there's not really anything that I don't feel like I make the same thing twice anyways. I don't know if I could do that. And that is not a flex at all. Like sometimes I wish I could. Sometimes I wish I could make a red one. Sometimes I wish I could match the couch, but it just doesn't really, that's just not how I think.
Yeah. Well, I think it's good to know yourself on which way is going
A
to
little
work
bit,
better, right?
yeah. Just get kind of hung up on the shit you can't do.
Yeah. So paint me a picture of what the scene looked like to you when you first started.
Oh, I think when I first, are you talking about Boro or pipes or what do you
Wherever
mean?
you want to go with it.
Well, I have a couple different like angles on that because I think was always at a point where I was always hearing about the glory days, where it's like I think I graduated college right in like 2008, 2009. And that was like right when like the recession was like kind of a big thing. And so I was like, I instantly left school and moved to Seattle, and it was already like almost impossible to sell work because if you weren't already established, because it's just people. The first thing that gets cut from people's budget is usually art because it's considered a luxury when it's anything but that, And so I was sort of kind of like forced into a way of just staying focused, creating things, even if I didn't think they were going to sell, just trying to work through ideas and like honing on some of my skills. And sorry, what's the question again?
What did the scene look like?
The scene look like? Well, in the soft glass scene, it was kind of the people that were selling work in the 90s and the early 2000s were still selling work at that time, but there wasn't as many sales opportunities for some of the younger artists first coming into the scene. Most of the time, people would work for other folks, and kind of do the traditional way of like climbing the ladder, the totem pole, and paying your dues and all that. And that didn't necessarily appeal to me as much. I would sell work on my own, but to because galleries would have to like take a chance. Like I feel like some of the stuff I make is pretty niche, and or what some maybe a gallery that sells larger vessels and well-made things, but like it's just my stuff was maybe a little bit more risky, and the Boro scene when I first came in was around 2015. I made the crossover because I was just started to become more aware of, and this was right when Instagram was kind of hitting its stride pre-algorithm, and I was turned on to all these artists that were making sick shit, like because like I love glass, like that's what I'm saying. Like I'm like this person fucking loves glass, and I'm like let's make this happen. So like I didn't know the rules of the Bora world where it's like you have to maybe get to a certain point before you can work with somebody or whatever. Like I was just from not knowing and being from the soft glass scene, I was just like, yo, like Joe Peters, Coil, were both artists that I was like, these people know what the fuck is up. And we hit them up and be like, yo, would you ever want to work together? Like from one glass artist, one glass lover to the next or whatever. And they both were down. And so we made a couple pieces together, and that little did I know about how everybody, it's a very tight community, the Boro scene, like it's very, very close together. And from working with them, those guys are obviously at the top of the game. So, it went from like me thinking I'm just, and also Zach P as well, because these are all styles that I could appreciate and like stuff that I feel like, we could probably come up with some cool stuff to make together. And I can't necessarily speak for them, but I think that they also probably felt the same way, which is why they, agreed to work together. And so I felt like coming into the Bora scene was pretty receptive, because I think that there was some kind of, you know, nobody really knew a lot about soft glass, but could tell that, there was relatable things with the stuff that I was making because I used the torch a lot. And, I often think that, glass is the language when there's a language barrier. So it's like, that's why you can blow glass with people from Japan, or, because like we might not speak the same language, but we both, speak glass,
Right.
and so I feel like I was very grateful to be kind of accepted into the Boro community to a degree, because you know it also turned me on to a market that was more receptive of the work that I was making. Younger, people that grew up in the '90s and could fucking catch the references that I'm throwing into things, and so like that was a little bit more appealing. And I was like, and also people were buying work and using it. Like I really really liked that. Like whereas like it didn't just sit on a pedestal in the great room. It was like people were taking the things around, they were holding them, they were treating them like expensive ass toys. And like I liked my work to be engaging like that. So I felt hitting the Boro scene in stride, or making the crossover a little bit was it felt like fun. It felt like and things were selling a little bit better as well, like I said, and that's always nice. Like I feel pretty satisfied when I finish a piece or whatever, but to get the sense of like validation from like someone else also feeling like they really want this is like was really nice, because I wasn't selling as much in soft glass because I was just kind of making weird shit, and everything sells, but just not always right away.
Yeah, and do you feel like the Boro scene kind of accepted the weird a little bit more as well?
Yeah, I think definitely. I don't think that the soft glass scene didn't or anything, because there's still. I do think they're on different wavelengths as far as like what is viewed as contemporary, or like I think there's a lot of also things that are attached to Boro, at least in the pipe scene too. Um, that it's like, because like function is obviously like a huge deal as well. There's and that's something that took me a little bit longer to figure out, because I've just coming from a place where I just want to create a character, execute it to the best of my ability. Also, have to learn how to flame work. This is a totally different process for me. And then on top of that, try to add function to it. And function obviously matters. And that's something that took me a lot longer to grasp. And I think people could appreciate the weird factor or whatever, like could appreciate the unique qualities of my work. But as far as I want this because it rips, is like I always thought of function as kind of a bonus for some of the pieces I'd make in Boro. And I don't know if that is necessarily the best way to go about business, which is what I think makes the pipe industry a little different than a lot of pipes can be art too, but the art world itself is I wouldn't say is as hung up about like whether or not a piece moves water around successfully.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. What do you feel inspires your work the most right now?
At this exact moment,
Yeah.
I think I think hope inspires my work the most right now. The hope that people, are more inept to going towards authenticity over mediocrity, like who's trending or who's hype shit. Like it seems like for a long time, and not just with any specific scene, it's always sort of been like, you know, people like I think the hope for the fact that like technology has helped prom- artists promote themselves a bit. Like I like that because like I think that there's enough money out there to go around. I think the hope that this can be a less competitive industry and realize that we need to rely on each other a bit more and put others on a bit more and really like stick to the virtues of what being in a community is all about, glass art, whatever. And I think I do feel like from what I can tell, like it seems like that's a little bit more on the rise where, the more and more we see just like horse shit on the internet, and I'm not talking about glass art. I'm talking about just people blowing spit bubbles and making millions of dollars, like, or people selling their bath water on OnlyFans or whatever the fuck, whatever it is. And um, I think the hope for, the real artists is on the rise because I think the cream always rises. It's like sometimes and I'm not speaking about myself specifically. I'm saying that like I think that there's like a cultural turn to where people want things that feel real, that feel authentic, that don't feel like they're, being sold to them or there's some sort of deception involved with whether or not something feels good, and so I think I stick to the hope, as much as I can because I believe in it. I believe that, you know, art is sustenance. I believe that it's there when people need it, and I think that it's better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it.
Yeah. Love that, dude. What is your favorite thing to do outside of glass?
I well, I like to get out and about as much as I can. I love traveling. I like to experience places. I call it field research. It's all factoring in.
Yeah.
When you're an artist for a living, it's a lifestyle. You can't turn it off. Um, so like anytime I feel a little bit closed in, or like I feel like I'm kind of drying up a little bit ideas wise, or I'm like just going a little cuckoo, like I'm like I need to get out now, and I'll set up different opportunities for myself, holler at homies or whatever, and set up little excursions throughout. So like I would say traveling around, experiencing new things.
I think we got a little pause on the for some reason it stopped recording for a second just
Just
on
right
that
there.
last part, but I think we're okay.
You good
We'll
now?
just yeah, we have all the audio anyways, so we'll just go from you like taking your dog to the beach, and I think we'll
Okay.
reset there.
Okay, cool. Ready?
Yeah, keep going, man.
Yeah, I like taking my dog to the beach. Having a dog has helped keep me pretty grounded with a lot of things. I think we can learn a lot from dogs. Their their just overall existence is just something that inspires me because I'm a textbook overthinker. So the dogs inspire me to have more of a routine. My dog Smokey, she also inspires me to get out a little bit more because it's so easy to get wrapped up in the shit you're doing. Like sometimes I just need to fucking take a walk, you know? And so I like doing that. We like to go to there's so where I'm at is there's salt water over here and then there's fresh water over here. And it's like connected. So I'll take her over to the salt water. We'll get like the rinse going. You know, I gotta watch out for sea lions though. And come back to the fresh water and take a little rinse dip. And I'm from Ohio originally, so there's not really a lot of spaces you can do that in Ohio. So there's a good feeling of achievement involved with that. And so I like daily reminders are definitely things that I like to provide for myself if I can, you know.
Yeah.
I also like disc golf. I like, riding bikes. I like anything frisbee really, and sports. Always like sports. It's hard to get them organized when you're in your 30s, though. I never understood that. Where it's like there's like 10 people on your co-ed dodgeball team. I'm like, how's that happen?
I've always been much more of a solo sport person, so I
Yeah,
never
I'm
had to
like, I'm like,
organize
I'm
a
like, give me a
thing,
tennis
but
racket and a wall. I'll be fine.
exactly, man.
Hard to
Uh,
organize.
what is your favorite thing to make right now?
Right now, right lately, I've been making these little glass flowers, which is, I think, when you first start making glass, that's one of the first things you make. That's one of the first things you learn how to make is a glass flower. And I like the idea of coming full circle with that. And mine are definitely more complex than the first ones I've ever made. And I've been incorporating some of my, creating a scene ideas that I was talking about earlier, where I'm creating a setup for these flowers, where they're called giant flowers, because it's an exercise in perspective where because everything on the phone is the same size. Most people look at art like 100 to maybe 1,000 times more people will see something I posted than will see it in person. And so I like to play into that idea a little bit and just treat all the pieces like they're 4 inches tall. So I create these scenes where I'll have these flowers, and like I said, I call them giant flowers because they all have little tiny miniature 1/60th size people that are set up in the scene around the flowers, and like that's the image that will exist online. And so I'm calling them, giant flowers, you know, because it depends on who you're asking,
Right. And
and
how
I
you're
and
seeing it.
exactly. And so I think like, I'm big on perspective and trying to always like, create a well-rounded perception on things in general, like sort of like an artist's quest of mine, like there's no right or wrong way to view things, but I want to kind of focus on things, and then ultimately, like once I have that dialed in, I can play with those ideas a little bit, and that's kind of where I'm at with these.
Yeah, it's great, man. What do you hope the scene looks like in 10 years?
The glass scene, the
Yeah. And you can talk about any of the glass scenes. Really, you got a
I
couple.
got a few different things going. I think what do I think?
What do you hope it looks like in
What do I
10
hope it
years?
looks like? Honestly, I can't really speak on the Boro pipe scene as much because I think a lot of that is related to more like cultural changes too. Like you see a lot of stuff about people utilizing more technology stuff. Like people want to have electronics, I mean,
Yeah,
things are a little easier
vaporizers,
now.
yeah.
Yeah, vaporizers, all that. So I think there's a lot of ebbs and flows with the way that culture is, like, and also like fashion too. Like this, any kind of wearable art also is like kind of, kind of goes like this with the things that people are wearing, and so to it's hard to say where the scene is going to be at in that realm because of like we don't know where society is going to be at later too, or like what's trending now or whatever. Like I think like I'll see pieces that the like pipe makers have made that are like highly successful and just concept, execution, all that kind of get maybe glossed over a little bit just because it's not necessarily what's in right now. Like, you know how it is. Like sometimes people are like, oh, like sculpture is selling really well. Like recyclers went hard for a second, and it's like, so it's really hard to predict where that's going to go. But like I said before, I think that with where the hope comes in is that I think that people want to support artists. Like I think you know we can be really inspiring to people that maybe can't or maybe don't know how to create themselves, and they want to kind of reciprocate that energy a bit. So it's like, how can you do that? Like, well, you can support them, and it's like we're in this journey together, kind of, because like we can't function or live without the collectors, and so we really appreciate it when we get support through that. So I think that'll always be there. And the soft glass scene, and honestly both, I think that there needs to be like a little bit more cohesion with the fact that we're all like doing this really cool thing that not a lot of people really understand as much. And you see things like the Netflix show, which is like, it's definitely creating a lot of exposure for what we do, the Blown Away series. And I think it's really good for artist recognition as well, and spreading the message, because I think we're so niche in what we do, and the hash market is the cannabis industry has helped with that a lot, because that's a huge industry, and so that creates a lot more reach for what we do. And then there's also so to tap into that market that's outside of glass, I think that would be probably the next step. Like keep people keep making stuff, like everything that is like new and made now is contemporary, like just by default almost. So it's, I think once it only takes a few people to break through to the masses to where everyone's like, oh shit, and I think so exposure through the Netflix series, I think exposure through other realms, which I see a lot of artists doing through like collaborations with people in different disciplines, like toy companies and like fucking shoe companies, and who knows, like I don't think that there's any limit to. So I think, branching out a bit, I hope that the glass scene, once they're received by the larger market of the world, as far as like what glass art is considered at that point, I think, once we get to that point, I think we will get there, and we're already kind of doing it. Then it's, I think we'll be good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great answer, man.
You think so?
Love them. I
Are you
love
just, are you
every
just
answer
saying
you've
that?
been given. No, but I do notice though, if you watch the videos, a lot of them I'll go, yeah, love that at the end of stuff.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
trying to
because you
catch
don't
it,
you
and
don't
then
want to
the
tell people
uhs.
that what they said sucks.
Well, yeah, but I don't say it if I don't mean it. Put it that
You're
way.
like falling over in the chair. You're like, no, for real.
I'm
though.
actually sleeping behind the camera.
Yeah, like you have like the eyeglasses on. And it's like,
What do you feel more glass blowers should be paying attention to?
oh, well, dude, I'm not a big fan of the shouldsies.
Okay.
Ultimately,
Answer it however you want, man. Yeah.
well, I don't. I think I can only speak for myself in that one, but I think what would be okay. Well, all right, I'll answer the question. I think what could be good that everybody should recognize or not forget is that we're all in this together. Like it's not a competition. Um, you know, people have to create their own opportunities, and sometimes shit is just about who you know. If you're in the right place at the right time, like sometimes you get lucky, or it's all about who you know, like all that shit. So, but it's like it's not, like I said, it's not a competition. There's enough money to go around. I think if people will continue as they are to come together and be more inspired by, say there's somebody that's doing something that I want to do. I don't want to be I don't want to be jealous of them having something that I want. I'd rather be inspired by what they're doing and find my own way to get there too. And I think like that's what I'm saying with the shouldsies is like perhaps that's something that I like to focus on, and that works for me, both with what I can create for myself and honestly mental health. Like I think people should realize that what we do is, especially when we promote online, is that we're almost being like vulnerable for a living. For some of us, like some people have the skill to just put something out there and it's like fuck you or don't. And it's like some of us put something out there, and it's more like I hope that people enjoy this because I enjoyed making it, or whoever. And it's so to find a balance between those two things, and not, be more proud of yourself for just even creating this, as opposed to, you know feeling vulnerable, trying to seek and need validation and deem that as success, is a good way to live by, because I think it's all about like being satisfied over successful, because that's something you can actually control.
Satisfied over successful. That's great.
Yeah, like, does it feel good? Then
Yeah.
do it, and then do it again.
Yeah. All right. Last question. What do you hope to accomplish in glass?
I think that I mean, additionally,
Again, however you want to
what
answer it,
what
man.
I what I would like to accomplish in glass is to, and I tell this to students too when I teach, is that I like to, everybody wants to make it, right? Like, or at least get to a point where you're like, I done did it, And I think establishing what making it means to you, whether that's getting your work into some gallery that you've always wanted to, or if you want to travel around, make work with a bunch of people, or if you want to sell your work for $1 million, whatever that is, just be clear on your objective to yourself about what making it is, so that when you get there, you can accept that the assignment is done and you can move on. Because it's so easy to chase the invisible dragon, as an artist, and just always be like more, 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 never enough, never enough. And like, it's good to have drive like that. It's good to have ambition, but it's also good to recognize when you've, you know gotten to a point where, you know you did what you set out to do, and hopefully at that point there's more avenues for you to go through. And I feel like that's where I'm at right now, is that I want to continue to make glass. I want to continue to express myself through glass, but I also want to hone in on my branding as a personality, as a person. I want to, my glasses is a form of who I am, and it's an extension of myself. And I'd like to see what other extensions of myself will really actually, kind of hit it. And I don't always know what that is, but I know that I've gotten to a point that I've always wanted to have a studio where I can make, create, and be unobstructed by really anything. And I've got that. I've got my own residency, and it's not that I want more. I'm acknowledging that I've set out, or I've achieved what I've set out to do. Now I want to see what's next. I want to see what's around that corner. So I'm I'm really looking forward to, you know, leaning into the hope and relying on my talent and honing in on my delivery.
Great. Excited to see that as well, man. Thank you very
No
much.
problem.